Hello from Rappel Cybersecurity. This is the second part of the ISO SAE 21434 training. Here we will present an overview of UNR 155 regulation and highlight the mutual relationship and differences between ISO SAE 21434 and UNR 155. Some points to remind before we start. This presentation is not intended to be used for certification or compliance purposes because these activities require a rigorous multidimensional approach that cannot be fully presented here. The focus is on ISO 21434. A dedicated presentation on UNR 155 regulation will soon be available on my YouTube channel. As you know, ISO standard is not free, so you need to purchase a license to have full access. Therefore, only a limited content is provided on slides. We try to put references and links to all information that we present so you can check the sources of information. Feel free to distribute or display this presentation as long as the content is not altered. And finally, it is highly recommended to view part 1 before this presentation. The table provided here is an example to highlight certain cybersecurity roles in an organization. Many other roles can be introduced, of course. However, please pay attention to the cybersecurity manager, who is supposed to work with both project-dependent and independent teams. 4 subsections will be presented. The first one is understanding UNR 155 regulation, and secondly, differences and common points between UNR 155 regulation and ISO 21434 standard, and thirdly, a general reminder on standards and regulations, and finally, questions to test yourself. Here on this slide, you can see the upper and lower organization tree of WP29, that is the World Forum for Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations. At the top, there is the UNECE, which is one of the 5 United Nations regional commissions administered by the Economic and Social Council. We will not go into this part, including the ITC. Please refer to the link at the bottom of the page for further information. WP21 is one of the working parties of UNECE, and its role is to work on 3 agreements shown with yellow boxes on the right. UNR 155 adopts 1958 agreement. You may have a look at the map on the upper right corner to see the countries that are part of this agreement. The coordination of WP29 is done by steering committee on the right, so you can see it here. Underneath in the light blue boxes, you can see 6 subsidiary working groups of WP29. Here, you might wonder what is the GR prefix. In fact, it's coming from the French acronym Groupe de Rapporteurs, which is the equivalent of Working Party in English. Under the GR that we are concerned, GRVA, which is the Automated, Autonomous and Connected Vehicles, there are several informal working groups. You can see the list of informal working groups on the right. The one who is responsible for the UNR 155 regulation is the one highlighted in yellow, so which is cybersecurity and software updates. Well, that's almost the complete hierarchy of the UNR 155 regulation. For more information about the organization and its history, you might consult the wiki page at the bottom. UNR 155 has 2 main parts. So the first is the CSMS, Cybersecurity Management System, at organization level. And the other one, written in green, is cybersecurity at vehicle level. On the left, you can see cybersecurity management system that includes the requirements for the organizational level cybersecurity processes. These processes are required to perform cybersecurity activities under discipline and obtain the required outcomes at project level. You may see here different cybersecurity processes mentioned in the regulation. In fact, these processes are mentioned in the regulation, but how to implement is not explained. On the right, you can see main activities related to the CSMS process. Of course, each activity must have an outcome that is a work product, and it shall be in the required quality. And similarly, like the CSMS, you might be asking the same question. So how will I achieve all of this, and according to which criteria? The answer will come shortly, but it is mainly ISO SAE 21434 standard. Now let's talk about the differences and common points between UNR 155 regulation and ISO 21434 standard. On the top of the page, you can see the timeline of important events before and after the publication of the regulation. At the time when UNR 155 was released, which is January 2021, only the early version of the ISO standard was available, so which is, as you see, the DIS. But if you look at the timeline, the FDIS version of the ISO standard was released in February, just 1 month after the regulation, and the final was released in August, so roughly 7 months after. So we can say that at the time when the regulation was released, the ISO standard and the working group was sufficiently mature to support the development of the regulation. The Venn diagram below shows certain similarities and differences between the UNR 155 regulation and the ISO 21434 standard. For sure, they have a lot in common. Nevertheless, the objectives of these texts are greatly different. UNR 155 describes what is required for cybersecurity homologation, and this is definitely mandatory for OEMs. The OEMs need to achieve compliance with the regulation by 2022 for new vehicle types and by 2024 for all vehicle types. On the other hand, ISO 21434 shows how to obtain what is required in the UNR 155 regulation. So it concerns both OEMs and their suppliers. It's a good metric for OEMs to ensure that their suppliers are cybersecurity compliant. UNR 155 lists threats and corresponding mitigation, then requires OEMs to justify compliance with these requirements. On the other hand, ISO 21434 doesn't provide any technical solutions. Therefore, the OEMs and their suppliers will rely on their own technical expertise to mitigate the cybersecurity risks. Homologation process is managed by national UNEC authorities and performed by bodies that are delegated. However, ISO certification can be achieved through several TISAX approved bodies. You can see the link at the bottom of the page, and you can see all the approved bodies all around the world that you can get your ISO 21434 certification. UNR 155 requirement cannot be totally satisfied by application of the ISO 21434 standard. A rigorous and step-by-step study must be followed with the national authorized bodies. In principle, first, the CSMS is audited. Then, the cybersecurity concept of the product and testing is audited in parallel with the development process. The supply management also plays a very critical role, as it is the OEM's responsibility to gather the required evidences from the suppliers in decent quality. Now, let's make a sum up and remind the differences between standards and regulations. A regulation can incorporate codes or standards or be on its own. Unlike a standard, a regulation does not necessarily require any industry consensus or knowledgeable body to put it in effect. A standard, however, describes the how-to and creates a common language in industry that facilitates documenting the requirements, practices, methods, or operations, building confidence about quality, safety, and cybersecurity for users, and lowering the cost of production as requirements are standardized. Here comes the questions to test yourself. The answers can easily be found in the slides. Good luck! Thanks for listening. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel and follow the LinkedIn page not to miss any updates. See you soon!